Hey everyone, welcome to the Unhandled Exception podcast. I'm Dan Clark and this is episode number 80. And today I'm joined by, sorry I'm going to totally butcher your name, Jan De Dobbeleer?
Close enough. Jan De Dobbeleer.
I was close.
Yeah, really close.
I'll just say Jan.
That works for me.
And we're going to chat about the awesome Oh My Posh. Before we dig in, and then I'll do the usual bits and bobs about sponsors, could you just give the listeners a quick intro to yourself and tell us about what you do?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Jan. I'm 44 years old. I live in Belgium, for those who know where that is, small country in Europe. I've been in software engineering for, let's say, a little bit over a decade now. Before that, I was actually a watchmaker. I think there's a few people who know this from previous podcasts or sessions, but it's not a well-known topic. I transitioned into software engineering because I really loved playing with computers and I wanted to build mobile applications primarily. That was my idea. And then I started building software after hours, got challenged to optimize the command line experience in Windows at one point in time. And I guess the rest is history. So I've been doing that for, I think it's a little bit over a decade now that I've been building on My Posh, which is actually amazing to realize.
Oh, wow. I thought Oh My Posh had been around longer than that, to be honest. It feels like I've been using it for quite a long time, maybe not 10 years, and that's quite an interesting transition from a watchmaker. I know a lot of people shift into software development from different careers, but yeah, I didn't know you used to be a watchmaker.
It's actually, if you look at it, it's roughly the same, at least in terms of how you approach things. In software, you know this probably as well as I do, is that you can fix a bug with another bug. So the trick is to figure out when you're debugging something or figuring out how do I get this to work is to find the actual problem or figure out the right solution. And watches are the same. You know, I was working on mechanical watches, I think for, let's say, 5 to 7 years for big luxury brands. And you have the same mindset when you repair a watch. It's like, I need to fix this the right way. I need to find the actual issue because maybe my predecessor, which could have also been me, made another mistake that alleviates the issue, but all of a sudden you have two problems in your watch, right? So getting that run or making it run on time actually requires the same mindset you have as when you approach software with issues and whatnot. So for me, that was a very natural transition. Felt like I've been here before. I know this process, but you just apply it to something completely different, but it's pretty identical.
I do find going the other way as well, the skills I've learned in software development, which there's a lot of problem solving and just breaking things down and working things out, applies to so many different aspects of life. And I feel like if you're a good software developer, you're going to be good at a lot of different job roles, which makes me a lot less worried about AI, to be honest, because I think I can pivot to do whatever really. And I think a lot of those skills have come from what we've had to do in software development, just diagnosing issues, solving problems. It's interesting the parallels with different careers.
I agree.
So as I mentioned before, with a few usual mentions. So firstly, this podcast has its own Discord community. And if you head over to the website unhandledexceptionpodcast.com, you'll see a big Discord link there. And also I have a monthly newsletter where I do handpicked developer news items from the past month. And this includes a dev tip, a dev comic pick, as well as podcast updates about the show. And it's a great way to keep up to date with software development news. More biased towards .NET and Azure, but it's also just general software development news. I've started doing a lot of AI stuff in there as well. If you want to sign up, there's also a subscribe link on the podcast website. And lastly, a quick reminder that this podcast is brought to you by Everstack, which is my own company providing software development and consultation services. For more information, visit everstack.com. Right, that's out of the way. We can now talk about Oh My Posh. So I'm quite a huge CLI fan, and I've used Oh My Posh for quite a few years. So I want to start off by saying a big thank you for creating the project. It's awesome. And every time I load up my terminal, it's there looking at me and it's very useful information. But I guess for the listeners, we should probably start off with, what is Oh My Posh?
That's a very good question. So originally, the challenge it aimed to solve was, can I make my terminal experience more pretty, appealing, rather than you start command from the Windows, you get this very basic window in front of you with just, I guess, the drive or the path where you're at, and then the chevron, if I'm not mistaken. That's not really appealing. And if you look at other platforms, especially thinking back, 15 years ago, Linux, Mac OS, they all had more, appealing visualizations when you open up your terminal. You could see colors, you could see more context, you could see all of these things. And that didn't really exist in Windows, at least not officially or maintained in a way that was on par with that experience. So that's what it does. You open your terminal, you've installed on My Posh, you configure it the first time, maybe you open PowerShell command prompt, and instead of that basic prompt, you see a colorful prompt showing where you are with some status codes that are also colored, etc. So that's what you get. That's what it does. But it integrates with a lot of different tools, allowing you to show a lot of different contexts straight from your command prompt in the terminal.
With the name on My Posh, as in like Posh, presumably like PowerShell it came from, do you get a lot of users? Like I know from your website, just looking at it, it says one configuration works everywhere: PowerShell, Bash, ZSH, and I don't know how to pronounce that, Fish, New Shell, and more. Windows, Mac OS, Linux, WSL, containers, blah, blah, blah. Do you get lots of users that have, well, not users, but potential users that just assume it's Windows and PowerShell only?
That's still around for sure, because it has its roots in that ecosystem. And I guess that bias or that, the perception is still around. But I have to say that for the past few years, that's been shifting quite significantly. So it still happens, but it's maybe once or twice. And I see this on socials primarily because I monitor Twitter, Blue Sky, Reddit, etc. All of that just to see, okay, what are people saying about My Posh? And then sometimes it still pops up and I'm able to just, pitch in, share it to these people like, hey, you can also use this on Linux. You can use it on Mac OS. You can use this in any shell you want. And it's usually a very pleasant surprise for them. Yeah, it has its roots in PowerShell. That's also where it gets the name from. I was inspired by My Z Shell, and that's the origin. That's where it all started. And it would be silly to just change the name now that it's been around for so long. I thought about it, but I can't come up with a better name anyway. So I just said, well, let's just keep it. It's cool anyway.
Yeah. Z Shell, is that how you pronounce it? Or Z Shell in the UK, I guess?
I think people also say ZSH and then Z Shell. You can pronounce it any way you want.
I always like when, if you're watching like a YouTube video where someone's demoing something and they get at the terminal and you can tell straight away when it's My Posh there, and everyone's customizations are quite different, and I just find it fascinating seeing other people's setups. Just looking at mine, just I suppose for the listeners' context so they can see what kind of things we're talking about. I know you've got this concept of themes and blocks and segments, is it?
Yeah, correct.
So for mine, I've got the path, and I've got like Git information if I'm in the directories of Git kind of thing. I've then got the execution time of my last command. Then I've got an error label that only shows if the last command was an error. Mm-hmm. And then on the right-hand side, I've got my current Kubernetes context name and namespace, and then how much memory I've got. I've had that set up for quite a while. I need to go back onto the website and have a look at what other options I've got for segments.
There's a lot, and it just keeps on expanding all the time. I'm actually jealous of people who stick to like one configuration and they say, this works for me. The downside of building a tool like this is that I never have that luxury. I'm always changing my prompt based on either the problem that I'm trying to solve or the feature I'm trying to build. So it's constantly broken, which is a good analogy. Like the watchmaker's clock is always broken. The terminal software developer's shell is always broken. That's, in my case, definitely true.
But I think this is going to, pardon the pun, prompt me to have a play with my terminal, because it's been like that for a long, long time. So I just need to see what else is out, like what other things. And even if I don't change the actual segments, but just the styling of them and things. And speaking of styling, I know I had to install, I can't remember the font name, but I had to install, was it Power something? A separate font which made some of the arrowhead kind of symbols, so those worked. Is there a particular font you'd recommend listeners use?
You can see this on the website as well. What My Posh needs in order to visualize this nicely is powerline glyphs, is what they're called. And there's a whole font library called Nerd Fonts that actually patch existing fonts with all of these additional glyphs. You can see that as icons basically being part of the font set. So it extends the font set with all of these nicely looking icons, like, as you say, the forward arrow, backward arrow, all these things. Maybe a GitHub icon, all of that stuff is embedded in the font as well. So you need to install one of those, except if you keep your font basic, because you can still keep standard characters. You don't need to go down that route specifically. That's all up to you. You can decide to visualize it like this or just keep it plain. You can do whatever you want. But if you want, and if you look at the website, you have a whole section with themes, and themes are basically pre-configured configurations. So out of the box, you can use them, you can get inspiration from them, and also look at what do they look like when they're rendered by Oh My Posh. See the configuration itself, figure out, okay, this icon or this styling, or it tweaks the colors like this, etc. Because there's so many features inside Oh My Posh. Obviously, I've been building on this for 10 years, and I'm very eager to give the people what they want. So as soon as I get a feature request, usually you'll get it in a week, 2 weeks time, because I work way too much on it still to this day. But it's fun. It's a lot of fun to figure out, how do I solve this challenge? And some of the challenges are they're not easy. Sometimes it's trivial, but there are cases where it's a lot harder, but it's a lot of fun to do. So I even forget which features I have sometimes. There are occasions where someone requests something, I start looking at, okay, I can build this, only to realize like maybe 10 minutes and like, wait, I already did this. This is already available. Maybe I didn't document it right, maybe I forgot about it, etc. But yeah, it's weird how that works.
So it sounds quite impressive. When you said about like different hurdles and things and quirks, I'm assuming with terminals that like terminal rendering in different shells, the right word, different shell containers, whatever you call them. Have you had many like big hurdles around that?
I guess those are the biggest challenges. I underestimate that making a tool that is available and works identically cross shell and cross terminal, because your shell runs inside your terminal, and depending on the functionality or the feature that you need, it's either shell side that responsibility lies, or it's terminal side that is lies. So terminals usually only responsible for rendering, so they make sure that all of the icons, etc., are correctly rendered and aligned and spaced. That's like one challenge you have sometimes. You cannot do a lot of magic when it comes to that rendering. The terminal needs to support it, but obviously people will come and complain to me if they see something doesn't really work. So there's a lot of cases where I have to start figuring out, okay, where did this originate from? Is this a terminal issue, shell issue, whatnot? And going cross-shell is also interesting, because your features, when you look at how the prompt behaves, obviously there is no standardization. Bash does it one way. Z-shell has a bit of alignment with Bash, but if you then go to command prompt or even PowerShell, it's completely different. So even just rendering the prompt is entirely different. So you need to learn all of these things. And then you come into the more advanced features. If you think, for example, transient prompt, if you press enter, what transient prompt does is it will replace your previous prompt with a shorter, more compact prompt. So if you have a lot of information that you want to see, but you only want to see it on your current prompt, but not historically, transient prompts allow you to define a smaller prompt with just a single segment and then replace that. But that means that I need to know when you press enter to then re-render the current prompt that you had prior to executing the command. So that's the sequence that actually happens under the hood. Figuring that out in all of these different shells, for example, for me is a lot of trial and error. There is not a lot of documentation depending on the shell, and the older the shell is, the less documentation you have. If you look at Bash, that's just terrible. Z-shell, that's also not enjoyable. PowerShell is a lot better, but even there, for these kind of things, there is no standard API that supports this. You have to figure out, okay, how do I then capture that key action, make sure the user now pressed enter or wants to execute the command, and then figure out, okay, how do I then reload the prompt? And there's a lot of interesting bugs that happen in that, or can happen in that whole process, where I'm also able to either contribute back or raise issues. I think the PowerShell team got a few of mine where they're like, oh, this is annoying. But it's only by doing these weird things that nobody originally designed it for that pops up. But it's been interesting though, because I had to learn a lot about how this works. It's easy to render something in a terminal and maybe add some colors. So there's the whole, and this is super, super old school ANSI escape sequences where you can tell the terminal how to render something with which color, even, italic fonts, bold, all of that is supported historically for a long, long time. But it's somehow like an ancient craft. You can read the basics really well, but then it comes to certain hacks as well. How do I, for example, make something transparent? That's an interesting use case because there is no specific command to make something transparent. So the hack that you can do is you can say, color this with this foreground and no background color. And then there's an escape sequence that says invert these colors. So by inverting it, you actually make a non-existing background color a transparent foreground color. And so you can make an icon completely transparent that way. Now, theoretically, that works perfectly. But then if you look at terminal to terminal, not all of them support this. So people report bugs and say, I have a black icon in my terminal, but my background is transparent. It's opaque, maybe, at X%. And they expect, obviously, to see also a nice arrow that is transparent. But it doesn't always work that way. So you learn a lot. You learn to work around a lot of things. I thought it was really cool to debug some of these things because it's not easy.
Have you been able to write automated tests around these kind of things? So I guess because it's a visual thing, it becomes harder, I guess?
That's been in my mind and on my backlog for a long time, to be honest. Because when I refactor stuff, usually that's where it really breaks. I've done, if you think back 2 years ago, this is like any software, right? I write everything after hours. So you're happy when something works, and then you try to ship it and see if it still works or also works for other people. And that's a bit of an iterative process. And in some cases, when you have to start refactoring, because you see, okay, I built something that is no longer maintainable. It works, but it's not maintainable. So you start refactoring quite a bit because you've learned so much along the way. That's when you see like, hey, this would be really beneficial to have a visual comparison. Like this is the pre, this is the post. Do they still match? Right? But it's doable, but it's not easy because it's mainly UI automation on a desktop to achieve this. Or you could say, I will just compare the output, and theoretically that should render the same. But it's also not always 100% true because you could shift things around and still have the same visual rendering, especially when you start to refactor, for example, if you want to reduce the amount of color codes that you push to the terminal. That's a good example of what I originally did. I colored everything separately. But then when you look at it, sometimes a user only changes the foreground color, but the background color stays the same. So there's no need to repeat that color sequence when we send that back to the terminal. Now doing that refactoring can end up in the same visualization, but of course you get a different string because in the end, all My Posh does is create a giant string that instructs the terminal, this is what you should be rendering and how you should render that. That's what we do. So this is one of these things where if people start to sponsor the project really well, that's when I'll have the time to do that, because this is not something you can do after hours. It's doable, and been on my mind, but I don't.
Yeah, I totally get, like, especially if it's an after hours thing, that like tests be one of those things, or especially as many tests as you would do if it was a full-time job, would be the first thing that takes a bit of a back burner, I guess. There is. So am I right that My Posh is written in Go?
Yeah. Correct.
The thing that jumps to mind is a .NET thing called Verify by Simon Kropp. And I'm sure it's this concept of snapshot testing. And I'm sure there's like Go must have an equivalent or something. But when you were describing it then, it just made me think about it, where you've you run the first time you run a test, it generates a snapshot, whether that's an image or JSON or whatever it is. And then you basically accept that as, okay, this is correct. And then the next time you run it, it compares against that snapshot, which is source controlled. I've used it quite a bit, and I find that in some use cases really, really useful for just saving time writing tests. But I had Simon Kropp on the show talking about this. I'll dig out the episode and put it in the show notes.
I know that exists for Golang as well, because I looked at one of those libraries in the past. And I guess time just wasn't my friend.
Oh, I know that feeling. So if one of the listeners or anyone wants to create their own custom segment, is that the right word?
Yeah.
Let's say they've got their own thing and they want to like integrate with My Posh or whatever and create a segment or block. What does that involve?
That's a really good question. And I'm going to provide a very, at the moment, relevant answer too. So I have a whole guide on the website that explains how do I add a segment. So there's a whole contribution section on the website that explains, okay, how do I contribute, but also how do I create a segment? So if you look at it from an architectural point of view, it's not difficult, but you need to hook up everything just correctly. But I also did to help people out, because if you start reading through that page, you might get overwhelmed with, oh, this is a lot of information, because I made sure all of the details are in there. So what I additionally have is, if you check out the project, so you fork the project, you check it out locally, it integrates with Copilot. You get a / command in your Copilot chat window in agent mode where you can type /segment, And you only have to explain like, hey, this is a segment I want to create with this name, etc. And it understands the full context, and it will set up everything for you the right way, so that from a bootstrapping point of view, boilerplate, everything will be there. And you can keep on iterating and ask it to update the documentation, etc., because it really understands the context of this is a segment, this is maybe a property, I need to add this to the documentation at this specific place, etc. So that really helps you just iterate and build on it, so you can focus more on what do I want to visualize and how do I get that information versus, I need to read through all that. It's still useful to read that page, to be honest, but if you want to get started really quick and just experiment and figure it out, that is super, super useful. I use it all the time myself as well now, because it saves me so much time to just being able to tell Copilot, I now added this property. Can you please just update the documentation for me? It's a lot better at writing what something does than I can. I'm not a native English speaker either. So yeah, that works magically. So that's what I would do. Go to the website, read it, skim through it, then just go play around with it, because it's not that difficult, to be honest.
Yeah, it's funny, when you first started talking then, I just thought in my head that actually I'm sure if you got like a really good prompt or instruction file explaining how to create one, you could automate this. And then you said about Copilot, so I thought, yes. So you've already done that.
It's brand new, by the way. I only wrote that last week because I was experimenting with it. I think they announced, prompt files only 2-3 weeks ago. I looked at it, I was like, hey, this is exactly what I was looking for. So the whole project is set up and integrated with Copilot, so that when you touch Go files, it will also inject the Go instructions and stick to my conventions. So you cannot make a lot of mistakes, or whenever it starts iterating with you on your code, it will stick to those conventions, which also saves times in reviews, because then I don't have to, make those remarks, and it will be good from the start, or at least we can only focus on, how did you build it? Is this performant enough? How do we do caching here? Should we do that, etc.? So the more architectural side of things, rather than, okay, you wrote an if else here, I don't like that. Can you, do early returns, for example? Copilot will do all of that for you because it's trained to do so.
Yeah, and it's getting better and better and better. There's so much going into, especially around like VS Code and stuff, and the GitHub Copilot extensions and all that kind of stuff. It's quite insane. So we've spoken about themes and segments and stuff. What's the most insane theme that you've seen someone do?
I'm always surprised when people actually dump all of the context they think they at one point in time are going to need into their prompt. And there are a few use cases like that. I have my Azure context, Kubernetes context, anything you can think of. It's just dumped in that line. You have, instead of one line, you have 3 or 4 lines of prompt just to display everything, which usually also takes a bit of time to fetch all of that information, because that is not free, obviously. But it's insane to see how far they push this sometimes. Like, this is more a command center than my terminal prompt. It always blows my mind. I'm more of a minimalist type person, which is weird. But My Posh allows you to do whatever you want. You can be whatever you want, or whoever you want to be. And it's pretty cool to see. Sometimes I'm just also overwhelmed by the simplicity and beauty of certain things, like which colors they use, the color palette. So they really thought about this. It's not just, okay, I'll just dump this here and I'll make this yellow, that green. No, they really thought about gradients and complementary colors, etc., like in a certain theme as well. I think that's amazing. I love it when people share screenshots where there's My Posh and then their desktop and terminal, and everything is around the specific theme. Like, this is me. This is my desktop. I'm at home here. And My Posh just allows them to go that extra mile in their terminal as well. That makes me super happy.
Yeah, I would say to the listeners, if you're already using My Posh, or if you actually give it a go after listening to this episode, either on the Discord or the episode page on the website, each episode has a comment section at the bottom. I don't know if you can put images in. I think you can. I've no idea. I'll find out in a sec. But if you can take a screenshot of your My Posh setup and your shell and shove it in there, that'd be awesome. I'll put a screenshot of mine in the show notes too. Mine's probably pretty standard. Let me load up my terminal. I'll send you on Discord. I'll send you what my one is. You've probably seen something similar 1,000 times before, but
let's have a look, because now I'm super curious.
There's mine. Oh no, so actually, I'm not in a Git. Let me go into a Git thing. I'll do it again.
The Git segment is the one I get the most, or at least I got the most interaction or questions or issues from, because Git is notoriously slow sometimes, and obviously people always bring that back to me and say, "Hey, my prompt is slow." Yeah, I understand, but if you look at the underlying logging, it's Git that's just too slow to fetch status, especially in corporate environments where people do not really maintain their repository from an efficiency point of view. And then it takes like 1 to 2 seconds, but it obviously just hits your prompt like crazy because you feel like you have to wait. But
I've not noticed any slowdowns with mine at all, with Git or anything.
Yeah, it's a beautiful one. But I have to be honest, Dan, if you kept it up to date, I think the past, let's say 2 months, I've been refactoring like crazy. So the people who've been on, I guess, who follow along every latest version, they've seen things break, because I can test only so much, and I really try to test everything, but it's difficult because there's just so much functionality. So I've been investing heavily into performance. That was like one of the things in my backlog. Like I really want to take the time to understand how I can make this a lot more performant and just not waste any time. And it does change quite a bit. I think I made it, at least in startup, it's easily 100 times faster now compared to 2 months ago.
Oh, wow. I must admit, I don't intentionally update it, so I could be on a really old version. How do I find out?
You can usually type just My Posh and then space version. That should show it.
I just tried to type, because I'd maximized the screenshot I sent you. I just went to that window and tried to type into a screenshot.
Nice.
Let me find the real terminal. So, My Posh. No, is it hyphenated?
Yeah, O dash.
Yes, yeah. 18.12. Is that a really old one?
Ooh, that's pretty old. We're at 20. But yeah, granted, I push updates way too often. I don't like to keep changes alive for too long. I just want to get them out there because, I don't need that context in my head.
I've just added to my to-do list to update My Posh. There we are. That's in my to-do list.
Let me know how it goes, because I'm curious. Sometimes people do tell me, hey, I updated from this version to that version, and then obviously something changed. Every major version usually has a breaking change. Wherever I can migrate automatically, I do. And there is a migration system in My Posh from a configuration point of view. Say we shifted some things around. It can solve that for you, but not everything is solvable. So if you do experience an issue, let me know. And for the people who are listening, you can always let me know or just look through the changelog or release notes. Every major one has a breaking change text that just tells you what to do to solve stuff if needed.
Yeah. With, because obviously this is an open source product, and I know like lots of open source maintainers have various horror stories about like how people are very expectant of requests and things or whatever. Have you any stories around that, or how have you generally found being an open source maintainer?
I've actually been enjoying that a lot. I think people are very grateful when you get a reply or you interact with them. There are cases, right? Not everybody's friendly, but I wouldn't say that's the majority. The majority of people, like 99%, the interactions are really cool. I sometimes feel like, because I do this after hours and sometimes I just reply, I'm dropping off my kids, someone reports an issue, I look at it and I reply too fast. Now my English is not always perfect, so in interactions sometimes I have the impression or people imagine me being blunt, but that's just me not having a lot of time. So I just make a quick statement to see, can we start a conversation around this? Maybe I have a few questions, but if I read back after a while, like, oh my God, Jan, you should have written that completely differently, or maybe use 2 sentences instead of 2 words. So I usually look at it the other way around, like, oh my, how would their experience be? Rather than my experience, because I feel like most people are patient. And I think the hardest part for me is how do I communicate and how do I, because I had a use case like that even this week where I replied something to someone and they took it, in hindsight, they took it the way with what I've written. I can imagine why they feel that way, but I never intended it to be that way. And I think that is the biggest challenge. Like, sometimes it just takes time for me to pick something up because I'm either working on something else and I want to finish this, so a pull request can stay let's say 4 to 5 weeks, it can remain a bit stale. But I always look at it or try to look at it as fast as I can. Usually when I have to wrap my head around something, like why did they implement it this way, I just let it marinate a little bit. And that's something I learned along these years. Like I do software engineering through marination. So I just let it sink to the back of my mind. And then all of a sudden I realize I can do it differently or whatnot, or I have a solution for the challenge. So that's the advantage of doing it, in open source, no obligations and whatnot, etc. But people are still waiting for me to provide feedback to whatever they're trying to add to the project. I guess that's sometimes the most difficult thing, like getting that interaction going and how that works. It's not always easy in an asynchronous and just written text type world. Sometimes I wish I just call someone and say, let's go over this pull request together, man. Let's figure it out. Because then I get the full context or whatnot. Tried it a few times to propose it, but people aren't eager to jump on a call with a maintainer to discuss their changes. I guess it's not that common yet, but it would be cool.
I'm surprised actually, because sometimes when you jump on a call, things are just resolved so much faster by just having a call rather than going backwards and forwards with text. But yeah, it's quite interesting because I know a lot of people I've spoken to who are open source maintainers have had lots of stories where people feel entitled and expect changes and things and everything, and it's good the experience you've described. It's quite interesting that in your head it was like you were thinking about it the other way around and how you come across to contributors rather than the other way around. I suppose that's contributors versus people just expecting you to do feature requests and stuff. Was the example you gave, was that where you thought you were blunt to a person? Was that a contributor?
Yes.
Okay, yeah,
exactly. Yeah. In hindsight, it was blunt, and if someone would have told me that, I would have probably reacted the same. But it's written text. You don't have an actual conversation, so you miss a lot of context. I think that's the hardest part for me. But in the end, it's a mindset thing, right? Of course, there are people who just expect things regardless. That's always going to be the case. But I don't let that. That's not the majority, and I can count them on one hand on a yearly basis, and you have to just let it go. I mean, be like Elsa, let it go, don't care. And it's difficult because I do get annoyed. I'm also just a human. I have emotions, and I can go from 0 to 100 if I don't pay attention. But the only way to being able to keep on doing this is to also say, well, this person might not be that relevant in this case, and I'm just going to focus on someone or something else and continue there. And this is how I approach my software engineering as a whole, is I look at myself first rather than pointing at the others. Like, what could I have done differently in this situation to have avoided all of this? Because that's a lot more enjoyable than staying frustrated about why do other people do the things they do, because people are gonna people, right? That won't change. So I try to figure out my part, my role in there. And that mindset actually really helped. And I was forced in that direction, to be honest, because I see a lot of maintainers going into burnout or, just throwing their project over the fence or doing annoying things because they feel like they don't get the recognition they deserve. But this is open source. I never started this because I wanted to be rich. The only thing I wanted was to build software. And now I get a lot of joy from others enjoying the things I built. And I have to be honest, my whole career in software engineering, I built it based on doing this after hours. I learned so much, and it also helped me grow professionally. That's the return of investment nothing else can ever give you. And if you make a little bit of money doing that along the side, that would be cool. And I'm sure my girlfriend would love me to just cash out and say, wow, now we're set for life because you've been working on this for over a decade and we haven't seen any return of investment. That's not entirely true. So it's in the knowledge, it's in everything you do alongside, also everything you learn, not just from a technical point of view, but also on a human. In my case, I learned so much about myself as well. I can also leverage professionally. Like, how do I engage with people? I'm just writing text, whatnot, all of these things. It's so important. Yeah, that's for me, that's the return on investment. So I can be annoyed at a lot of people, but in the end, I grow tremendously just by doing this. So thank you, everybody. And thank you, all of these annoying people too, because they made me who I am today.
Yeah, that's a very, very good mindset to have. Like a lot of the stuff I do, like with the podcast and news group and things, don't make money. But as you say, it's kind of indirect because you grow as a person, but also in the network as well. It's kind of like if like if you need to find another job or something because people know you through My Posh and various community stuff you do, then you'd probably then find it a lot easier to find something. And also just to request a higher salary because you've kind of proven you know what you're talking about because you kind of like, you've put yourself out there. I think it is quite valuable. But just with the open source thing, I think most of the listeners probably know this and I probably treat open source maintainers with respect. But I just want to say that to all the listeners, don't forget that most open source maintainers are doing it in their own spare time for free. They've got a family. There's other stuff they could be doing. Having people opening GitHub issues and being nasty to them and being very expectant and acting entitled about changes just because they want it is not the best way of treating that person. So I think just remember how you phrase things because, as Jan said, it's text-based as well. When you're talking in person and you put tone of voice on something, so you might have something a bit more jokey or whatever, the tone of voice in a text message is whatever the reader thinks it is, not necessarily what it is in reality. So I probably overuse emojis and smileys because for that very reason, because it might look a bit unprofessional, but it helps me get across the tone of voice, I think. But yeah, I think an important message, I think.
Hear, hear.
I did notice on your website that you mentioned Warp, like Warp Terminal, quite a few times. Is that a sponsor or is that or something else?
They do sponsor the project. I do have to reach out because I think we're beyond the due date for their sponsorship. But they do. I like Warp as a terminal, a concept, to be honest, because it's a very interesting thing that they've built. Maybe I'm pushing it, but for me, it's innovation in the terminal landscape that wasn't there for a long, long time. And they found trying to do something that is pretty unique in that ecosystem. So I was happy when they reached out and said, hey, we like what you do. So, okay, I also like what you do. Let's maybe do something together here and be supportive of one another. It's very much appreciated.
Oh, nice. I only ask because I'm hearing about Warp more and more, and they've got like the terminal that now they're trying to do more of an ID-based thing, but in the terminal and like a lot of agentic stuff. It's quite interesting. I've not actually played with it yet, but because I'm kind of aware that because it is so AI-based in the terminal, and I've got client stuff on my computer, so I'm kind of a bit nervous about that, but I should really give it a try. So like we mentioned about open source maintainers and stuff, if any of the listeners did want to get involved and contribute, what kind of contributions are most useful?
Segments is always a good idea, but I think we already have so many that I don't know if you will still find a use case. There are still open issues. I try to close as much as I can, but it's not really possible. So there are some you can look at. Usually the ones that are still open are the most difficult ones. So don't be surprised that you might not have an idea how to tackle that. But there's always documentation that can be revised, or even if it's just typos or wording or whatnot. That is a super useful contribution. We don't accept new themes anymore because they've been growing like crazy. And to be honest, I'd very much rather have people just download or copy one of the existing ones and changing it to their preference rather than referencing those directly. But you can always fix issues there if there are any. But documentation would be a good start. And there is still one segment. If you're faster than me, there's one request for a segment that you can start working on. You can look at how it works with Copilot, whatnot, to get you going. It's a source control segment. I think that feature request is still out there, but it's brand new from today. Other than that, if you have any idea or feature or issue, just go for it. Reach out. We have a Discord. So if you have no idea or you want to contribute, but you have no idea how, just drop a message, reach out to me and see what your skills are and how I could help you get going.
Terminal. Sounds good. So the listeners have two Discords to join, the podcast and your one.
Definitely.
So lots of homework for the listeners because they're posting your own terminal in either Discord or the podcast episode pages, comments. So lots of homework for the listeners.
You trigger me because actually I realized we do not have a channel in the Discord to showcase your terminal, which is rather weird, no? But it's just not there. Might have to just create that channel now.
No, we're getting homework now. I need to join your Discord as well, so I'll do that after the show as well. Did you see in the in the guest FAQ about the dev picks at the end of the show? My fault, I should have reminded you before, I just completely forgot.
Oh, I do have one. Something that's really interesting at this point, and it's in the current AI world, right? So you know that instructions are key in order to get an agent that is successful and tailored to what you want to achieve with it or how you want it to behave. And the next step, and I've seen this demo, I think I've seen a few videos on that a lot last week, is GitHub Spec Kit, where you interact with agents in a standardized framework that allows you to build. It was initially oriented mainly towards new software that you were trying to set up, where it walks you through specifying what you want to build, how you want to build it, and then creating a whole plan to execute on that. And I thought that was really, really interesting, because in the end, what you get is executable requirements that are then fed to an agent, build your whole software stack around it. And as you move ahead in your project and new features come to life, you always have additional specs like markdown files added to your project that tell like, what do you need to build? How do you need to build it? And you can also theoretically completely rebuild it with all those spec files. So it tries to create a whole framework around iteratively building on software with agentic AI within a specific bounded context that makes it more successful. And I thought that was really, really cool, because historically, I think initially when we started out in IT, there was a lot to do with, requirements and gathering all the information, being very waterfall and want to implement. Then Agile came and we kind of lost that momentum of maybe we should also do some requirements and write things down. I think if you're currently a software engineer in any company, you will know that requirements are key to successful delivery, and it's usually lacking in that department, right? So I like that evolution where writing requirements is no longer annoying and something I have to do in order to be successful, but it's completely driven by that approach of interacting with the AI and let the AI write all of the requirements, and you can just work on what do we want to achieve. So it alleviates you from having to write all that text, but the whole concept, the whole context for the agent is to really assist you in each step of that process to be very, very successful and have something you can keep on working with from, start of your project all the way to whatever feature you've built. And I thought that was super, super interesting. Even if you don't really care about using it, looking at how that was set up, because it just leverages existing functionality in the agentic landscape, especially integrated within Visual Studio Code, it could give you ideas on, hey, maybe I do have a use case where this type of pattern is very useful for me, right? So if there's anything you should be looking at today, tomorrow, that's what I would advise.
I will put a link to that in the show notes. And this is another to-do for my day later. my to-do list growing. So my dev pick is also AI related. And so there's a recent YouTube video by James Montemagno. He called it 5 Ways I Use Coding and Background Agents Every Day to Boost Productivity. So he's kind of demoing GitHub Copilot agents and also shows some things in VS Code you can turn on around this. And some things I didn't know about, like I use agent mode and GitHub Copilot quite a lot in there, but there was other settings you could change which aren't default, and then the GitHub extension. And he shows on the website, GitHub Copilot, where you can basically, if you've got an issue, you can just assign it to Copilot and it goes off and does things in the background for you. I tried that this morning, actually, because I'm reworking my website and I've got a GitHub issue for adding an RSS feed because I'm rewriting it, so it's in progress. So I tried it, I went to it and just literally assigned it to Copilot on the website. And I was starting to get an email saying, it's written this. It's like, it's got a PR for me and all this kind of thing. So it's gone off, whilst I've been doing other work in meetings and things, it's gone off doing work for me, which is awesome. So he shows different ways in VS Code how you can do stuff. And also related, this is a separate thing, but I saw an announcement by GitHub yesterday that they've released in public preview something called GitHub Copilot CLI, which I'm assuming you can basically do all this from the CLI as well, which is kind of like ties into our conversation today. So yeah, lots of cool stuff going on.
That's also one that's on my to-do list, by the way. I knew it was coming, but I never really had time. I guess I'll do that this evening.
With the time thing, it's kind of like, hopefully by playing around with this, we can play around with it by getting it to do work we would have been doing during that time anyway and get the time back.
Exactly. Yeah. Although if I'm honest with myself, I always say I build on efficiency so I can get time back. But the truth is I build on efficiency so that I can do even more stuff. So in the end, I'm never getting my time back. I'm only being a lot more productive, from automation all the way now to leveraging AI, which is an interesting course. In the end, if you love doing these things, you will only find ways to do it more. And let's be honest, it's not about getting that time back. It's just about investing it even more in what you want to do.
Yeah, but that's also why, as developers, we're not going to be able to work because, okay, everyone's like, we're going to lose our jobs because of AI. You're not, because it's making you a lot more productive, and businesses are always going to want more. Businesses always have backlogs full of work to do and stuff. And okay, you can be more productive. AI is going to be able to do a lot of it, but there's always going to be more stuff. It's always, we're just going to end up producing a lot more because AI helps us a lot. So we just need to make sure that we as developers keep on top of AI and how to use it. And one thing I've found with AI is it's easy to go down rabbit holes where AI doesn't quite do what you want, and it's a bit of a rabbit hole. So skills like learning, if you're going down a rabbit hole, and recognizing that, like what the different AI tools are and you can leverage. And I also think code reviewing and basically working through the slop that AI can create if someone using it doesn't know what they're doing and doesn't review and just blindly creates lots and lots of code. I think that's going to be a big skill set moving forward for developers, just being able to read code and undo some of the mess that AI will create.
Did you see the movement on LinkedIn where people call themselves vibe code cleanup engineers?
I saw something. I can't remember. I don't think it was LinkedIn. I can't remember whether I saw that. So.
Yeah, I love that. But it's true in the end. And this has been true all along, but I guess AI makes that only more apparent, is that as a software engineer, we are more architects, crafters. I need to understand, also low level stuff more than that high level stuff. And I think now that will only become more true, because the programming language, if we look 10 years from now, maybe that's no longer relevant, right? It doesn't matter whether I know .NET or C#, Java, Golang. Why would I, But from an architecture point of view, if we talk about security, efficiency, application design, etc., those are skills that all remain relevant. You will just use AI to no longer write code yourself and just do all of that boring stuff, but you will think about, solving challenges and architecturing for scalability and all of these things that will remain. And maybe there's a tipping point there as well. I don't know. But currently, that's where I see our relevancy being even more relevant. It's also what I share to other people. Like, AI will not take your job. But if you're not invested in AI today, the person next to you that's the person who'll take your job.
Yeah, exactly. AI won't take your job, but someone using AI will take your job.
Yes.
It's kind of like with the architecture stuff. Like at the moment we have kind of, before AI, like discussions like monolith versus microservices. Now we're going to be talking about micro agent services or macro agent architecture. So it's just going to be architecture talking about different nouns, I guess, different types of things, how different things fit together. But we are running out of time. I know you've got a hard stop. So is there anything that you wanted to mention before we do wrap up?
I would just say, if people want to get involved, contribute, do anything, and you don't know how, just join the Discord, drop a message, create an issue or discussion on GitHub, whatever works for you. We'll get the conversation going and figure out how that could work. And if anything you want to do is say, I enjoy this, but I don't want to contribute back with code or whatever, that's also fine. We also have some swag you can buy, or you can become a sponsor on GitHub. That also works. But it's nowhere near required to enjoy the product. So
I think, as you say, like sometimes just a message saying how much you're enjoying a product or a podcast hinted. Sorry, I couldn't resist. It goes a long, long way. Cool. So, well, with that, a massive thank you for joining me on the show. It's been, like, as I say, I've been a long-term user of My Posh, so I will certainly say I greatly appreciate what you do. It's kind of, and I will go and update to the latest version now, I think, because I didn't realize I was so far behind.
Thank you very much. My pleasure being here.
You're welcome. And a big thank you everyone for listening. A quick reminder that this podcast is sponsored by Everstack, which is my own company providing software development and consultation services. For more information, visit everstack.com. And if you're enjoying the podcast, please do help me spread the word on the socials. I normally use the hashtag unhandledexception, and I can be found on Blue Sky at danclark.com. But the best place to get in touch with me is on Discord. And all the things we mentioned today, including the dev tips and everything, I will put on the website in the show notes, which can be found on unhandledexceptionpodcast.com.